Is he on the line, Congressman Ron Paul?
I am. I'm sorry I'm a little late.
Oh, well, we're happy to talk to you whenever you can speak. If you were to be President, Paul, and let me ask you, probably the question on most people's minds right now is, how would President Paul create jobs?
Well, the president doesn't really create jobs. The community has to create jobs. Business people create jobs. If the government creates a job, it usually steals money from people who might more productively spend their money. The president and the government has a lot of responsibility to create an environment where businesses can create jobs. And what we've done over 40 years is we've destroyed that environment. We've destroyed it with our monetary system, our tax system, our regulatory system, the wasted money and the debts that we've run up, with the spending overseas. So that all has to change. But this idea that government can wave a wand and create jobs, they in some ways can, but if they do, it's a bureaucratic job, and it's a distraction. It usually does harm because it stole money from people who might have spent this money more productively. Our problem today is we've destroyed the confidence in the economy and the environment, and therefore business people are very, very skittish, and investors are skittish. But it took 40 years for them to do that, so we have to think about a revamping of this whole environment that businesses require to go out and take the risk necessary to create jobs.
Congressman Ron Paul, we just talked to Larry Kudlow, and he said that he does not agree with you about ending the Fed, but he said he likes your idea of linking the dollar to gold.
Yes. No, Larry's a good friend, and we have our little disagreements, and he places a little more emphasis on the Fed. And I guess he would like to see them to act more responsibly and be restrained by gold. And it is true, if you could do that, it's fine. But for the most part, central banks are never restrained. They eventually, break the rules and go and accommodate special interests. So that is the difference. But he and I agree that if we had, restraints placed on the Fed, that they just can't monetize debt and print money endlessly and keep interest rates too low, too long, the gold would modify that. The big question is would they listen to it? They didn't listen to it. We had a modified gold standard between 1945 and 71, and it helped to a degree, but it finally broke down because there was always abuse. But that's we're dealing with human nature there and politicians. So politicians hate gold because they can't spend money endlessly. And when the economy's on the boom part of the cycle, everybody seems to be happy. When the housing boom was going on and everybody's house was going up in value and they could borrow against it, they thought it was perpetual prosperity. But a gold standard would prevent that. It prevents the bubbles, and I think he and I understand that, very much in the same way.
You and one other Texan are the only two presidential candidates for the GOP that are surging in the polls, you and Rick Perry. What do you think of him as a candidate?
Well, I think he's very formidable because, he's a governor of a big state, and Texas has had, a pretty good economy compared to others. Of course, we've had a good environment here. I was talking a minute ago about the environment, but Texas has had a healthy environment for many, many years. No income tax, no corporate tax, and we're fortunate enough to have oil, and for that reason, and a right-to-work law. So I think, I think Texas has an advantage in that way regard. But I think I am talking about things much broader than that concept alone, because I'm talking about the foreign policy, I'm talking about monetary policy, I'm talking about personal liberties and the Patriot Act and so many other things that the other candidates are not talking about.
Can we clarify under what circumstances Ron Paul would be willing to commit U.S. troops to combat? Oh, and was our initial incursion into Afghanistan one of those cases?
Yes, I think security would have to be threatened, and you have to have proper authority. And President Bush was given limited authority right after 9/11 to go after those individuals responsible for 9/11, and I did vote for that. I immediately realized that that authority would be used, to a greater extent than it should have, And of course, it went into nation building and invading a country and overthrowing a country, and they sort of lost track of even the Al Qaeda and Bin Laden. That's why it took so long. But it was at that time that I also introduced a resolution to look at the issue of a letter of marque and reprisal, which means that the government targets, an individual or a group rather than a whole country, and they used that in our early history to go after the pirates. And I thought this was a perfect example of what the founders must have been thinking about. When you can't declare war against a country, then you target the individual, the group of individuals, and try to narrow the scope of the fighting.
Would President Ron Paul leave any troops overseas, for instance, Germany, Japan?
No, I'd bring them all home. I mean, that would give us such a great economic boost. I was saying the government can't really create jobs, but they can do some things to give us a stimulus. I mean, this would be a stimulus that wouldn't cost us any more money. If you brought all the troops home and they started spending all that money here at home, that could stimulate our economy. But right now, it stimulates the economies of Germany and Japan and South Korea because they don't have to pay for a national defense and they have their welfare system to finance. So indirectly, we're helping them on their entitlement system. At the same time, ours are going bankrupt.
Speaking of national defense, the Pentagon just released their report about China's military buildup. Does that worry you, and what should the U.S. do?
No, it doesn't really worry me because China has no history of moving troops around the world or having troops in areas 6,000 miles from their shore. They're acting more like we used to. They've been selling us a lot. They have a lot of our dollars, and they're investing them. While we're over there dying to spread democracy in Afghanistan, the Chinese are actually investing in oil and buying up natural resources. So, but compare the number-wise, we're still so far ahead of the whole world. We spend more money on our military operation than all the other countries put together. So because they're increasing a little bit more, I don't think it's that unusual. But we have ships, and vessels all around the world, not too far from China. We're in the Black Sea, putting missiles along the Russian borders. I don't see how that helps us at all. I just think that there's some people that would like to stir up the Cold War again.
If Ron Paul doesn't win the nomination of the Republican Party, would you entertain the idea of a third-party candidacy?
Not likely. The odds aren't good for third parties. We go over and pretend that we're going to spread our goodness and our democracy, but the democratic process here isn't all that great, because if one comes to the conclusion that the Republican and Democrats' policies aren't all that different, there's really not much chance of somebody cutting into that, because it's very hard to get on ballots and credibility remains very low. Media will not give you don't get into debates, so they sort of shut you out pretty easily if you're in the third party. So no, I don't think it's likely to happen for me.
All right. I'm wondering if there is someone that you would see carrying the banner if you were not to win the nomination. Is there someone that you would say, okay, I could still support that person?
The ones, the current candidates, there are some now. The answer is no as an immediate answer, but that doesn't mean it has to stay no, because I've noticed some of the other candidates now changing their tone and changing their conversation and talking differently about foreign policy. They're looking more closely at the Federal Reserve. So it's conceivable, that if they would accept some of these policies that I've been talking about, I certainly should keep an open mind.
Well, you are certainly catching on with the public, and the media has been slow to acknowledge it or acknowledge you. Why is that?
Well, I'm not positive. I guess they have to answer it. But I think sometimes it's a lack of understanding, because I come at economics from a free market Austrian viewpoint, which not too many of them have studied, so they don't understand the significance or how to explain the business cycle. So it's too strange for them. Then there are others who know exactly what I'm doing, and they see it as too much of a threat, because
you scare them.
to really defend the free market and no special interests. I mean, just think of how many people now qualify as special interests. That's all what government's about, and too often the special interests get together and say, we'll give you this and you give us this, and everybody gets their subsidies, and so it goes on and on. So I think there's a few who understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Congressman Ron Paul, who is your American hero over the years?
Well, I guess I haven't picked too many. There's a few, I guess, in politics. You thinking more recent or just over history?
Over history.
Okay, I admired Grover Cleveland because he was probably the last person that sort of wanted to follow the same foreign policy, and he believed in the gold standard, and he used to like to veto a lot of bills. He said we were passing too many laws. But so often I look towards some of the free market economists that have influenced me so much over the years, because I felt that they had a very intelligent approach and could defend what I think I naturally believed in. So people like Mises and Hayek and Rothbard are the free market economists that I followed.
You have such a refreshing message and so different that I'd like to spend more time talking to you at a future time. Maybe we could do this again.
Very good, and I thank you for having me.
Well, appreciate it. Maybe the next president of the United States, Ron Paul.